Hello, my name is Sarah Brewer, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my art today. I'm coming to you from my laundry room art studio in Mobile, Alabama. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So the title of my presentation is Geometric Design because that's the bulk of where my work is today. But I'm going to show you kind of where I got started and what I've been doing up until this week. So a little bit about my background. I went to art school, majored in art history, minored in ceramics. I thought art was really hard, so I ended up getting a second degree in mathematics because math was easy. And I thought I'd be more likely to get a job. So I stuck it out, did my master's in math, and then ended up teaching mathematics for 13 years. Then kind of shook things up, tried a few different jobs, and landed where I am today doing institutional research for university. And I'm also working on my Master of Fine Arts. And on the weekends, I work in a custom frame shop and teach geometric design classes. So I minored in ceramics in art school. I was a terrible ceramics student because the class happened to fall at the same time as the math department seminar, and I may have skipped class a few too many times to attend lectures on knot theory in the math department, and that made its way into my work. So when I made work, it was all right, but I skipped class a few too many times. I also studied oil painting in undergrad. Here's a still life and a figure study. I really love doing figure studies. My master's thesis, I studied a field called topology, which is the study of surfaces in space and properties of those surfaces that remain unchanged under deformation. And for my thesis, I wrote about a particular method of turning the sphere inside out without cutting or gluing, but allowing it to pass through itself. My thesis was about 100 pages of illustrations and about 10 pages of actual text. My math studies inspired my art quite a bit, and I found myself making art that was based on diagrams that I had drawn in my math notebooks. These two pieces are from my first solo art show that I had in 2010. I'm also was working on mixed media a lot during this time, collage and paint mixed together. So the piece on the left is another piece from that solo art show, and the piece on the right I made shortly after I had surgery for endometriosis. Here's another piece from that first solo art show. Each of these panels is about 2 feet by 4 feet, so this is a pretty big piece. They're spaced according to the Fibonacci sequence, so 1, 1, 2, 3, and then there's 5 panels, and an octopus has 8 arms. So the whole thing is a little less than 13 feet wide, which is another Fibonacci number. I have 2 kids. They're 9 and 12, and I didn't paint a whole lot after I had kids. Most of my art was done in sketchbooks for many years when my kids were small. I've been binding my own sketchbooks since I was in high school. And one of my favorite things to do, especially when I'm stressed out, is draw from little kids how to draw books. So my sketchbooks are often filled with whimsical characters and cute little animals. I've also spent a good deal of time making short films. We had these things called film scrambles where you have 48 hours to make and edit a film, and I made quite a few of those with my sister-in-law, Renee. Fast forward to 2017 when I got bit by the Islamic geometric design bug. These are two sketchbook pages of a pattern that is widespread throughout the Islamic world, the so-called canonical eightfold rosette. The one on the left shows the underlying circle packing in the construction, which mathematically interests me a whole lot and is sort of what drew me into these patterns, the fact that they have these underlying circle packings. And the one on the right features flowers that grow locally like camellias and clover. I was very lucky in 2018 to get to study with some tutors from the then Prince's School of Traditional Arts based in London. Now it's the King's School. And these are a couple of pieces that came out of that study. The left is a pattern from the Alhambra, and the pattern on the right is a design by master geometer Daoud Sutton. I still love mixed media. Here's a couple of experiments. The one on the left was hand-cut paper layered with watercolor, and the one on the right is a digital collage with some what's it called? Gold foil, not gold foil. I lost the word. It's okay. And gemstones. So I mentioned I love figure drawing. So I've had to find a way to incorporate figure drawing into my geometric design. So the piece on the left is a digital collage of one of my figure drawings superimposed on one of my geometric works. And the piece on the right is a video I'm going to show you that's a 5-foot by 7-foot cutout screen that I made for this art and fashion installation show in 2020. You'll notice the model is wearing a mask because this was early days of the COVID pandemic. In 2021, I was commissioned by a company called Tattoo Smart that makes Procreate brush packs for tattoo artists to make a brush pack of a couple hundred geometric designs that people can download and use in their tattoo designs. And here's one that I designed in a software that is called GeoGebra. That's my primary design tool. I also started a Patreon in 2021, and the pattern on the right is from the Adarain Madrasa in Fez, Morocco, and it's one of the designs that I made a sticker out of to send to my patrons. I have a couple different tiers. One of them you get access to workshops, and then there's a tier where you get things like stickers and postcards in the mail each month. And then the piece on the right was a commission for my friend, the Chinese-based electronic musician Throughout In, who is looking to mimic indigo-dyed African fabrics for this collaboration with Abishushu. Here's some more mixed media collage experiments. The one on the left is paper, not hand cut this time. I invested in a Cricut vinyl cutter that also cuts paper. So that's layered paper. And then the one on the right is a digitally layered collage. The pattern on the left is an original design of mine based on traditional principles, and the pattern on the right is based on a pattern from Ibn Mosque in Cairo. Here's a couple of animations that I made in GeoGebra software last year. The one on the left is a cardioid that I made for Valentine's Day. And the pattern on the right is based on a pattern from the minbar of the Sultan Barsby Funerary Complex in Cairo. Obviously, it gets kind of crazy at times, but it will resolve itself at times into that pattern. I also enjoy folding Islamic patterns with origami. Here's a couple of pieces that I folded with origami artist Ricardo Hinojosa, who goes by Kamikyo Dai on Instagram, and who is an amazing, amazing origami artist. Taught me how to fold these patterns in origami. And then they're both painted with gouache after folding. Here are a couple of what's called curvilinear patterns because they're based on circles and arcs rather than straight lines. The pattern on the left is from the minbar of the Kutubaya Mosque in Marrakesh that was taught to me by master Islamic geometer Adam Williamson. And the pattern on the right is from the minbar of the Mosque of Aqsa in Cairo. And it's one of the patterns that I've taught both last year and this year as Patreon workshops. This is a pattern that was taught to Daoud Sutton by master Keith Critchlow. The one on the left is a digital recreation, and the one on the right, I used the digital version and drew it with my Cricut machine, so it also acts as a 2D plotter, and then I hand painted the gold stars. Here's an original pattern. It's based on this technique that I presented a paper on in 2022 at the peer-reviewed International Bridges Conference for Math and Art on a method of constructing original patterns based on traditional methods by imposing these Islamic patterns on a class of tilings of the plane called K-uniform tilings. And this pair of patterns is based on a particular 4-uniform tiling. Still love cephalopods. The painting on the left is one of the first non-geometric things I've painted in many, many years. I had AI help me a little bit. I asked AI to create for me an octopus that would have been painted by Caravaggio with quite a bit of prompt engineering. And then I edited the heck out of it afterward and painted the result. Don't look too closely because you can tell his arms are a little weird from the AI generation. And then the pattern on the right, I expanded the underlying circle packing into the shapes of the arms of an octopus. So speaking of AI, I have also played around with feeding my geometric patterns into AI and having them reinterpreted as octopi and other fantastical creatures, mostly sea creatures, because I think they're cool. So in addition to Islamic geometry, I'm also really into the geometry of Gothic tracery, and I spent a good deal of time in August of last year studying This particular problem set forth by R.W. Billings in his Power of Form, where he presents this Gothic tracery pattern as obvious, although it turns out to be quite complicated geometrically and requires the use of several theorems of Apollonius in order to solve exactly. Here are a couple of patterns that I drew with my Cricut and then hand painted with gouache, constructed them digitally beforehand, both original patterns. A couple more animations. The one on the left is just based on a circle packing, and the one on the right is based on an 8-fold rosette. So I started my MFA program last fall, and my seminar class had us using augmented reality. So I took an 8-fold star rosette pattern that I had constructed and superimposed a digital animation of that pattern over an actual painting of that pattern. I also spent a good deal of time studying mathematical modeling and some Python programming that first semester in my MFA. And while doing so, studied this object called a harmonograph, which is basically two axes drawing simultaneously, two pendulums. And so I built one in Python. I also built it in my GeoGebra software, and so you can see all the different parameters that change. And then if you let the parameters go and animate it, you get this really cool chaotic wave that resolves itself in really interesting ways. So I'm just going to let this run for a little bit so you can watch it. Love that part. This past spring, I took a color theory class, and I spent most of my time making cut paper collages of Islamic geometric patterns. These two were dealing with value, or how much light or dark is in a color. If I were to make these two images grayscale, you would still see the underlying patterns. These two, I was also dealing with value, but I was also dealing with texture. Obviously, I went a little bit crazy with texture, the one on the left, and drew into the collage with some colored pencil. But I also wanted to show the underlying circle packing in the patterns. Here I was looking at intensity, and so the colors that I'm using here are muted colors and chromatic grays. And here I was looking at transparency. So none of these papers are actually transparent, but through the colors that I chose and the drawing on top of them, I was trying to hopefully give a sense of transparency. Outside of class, I was still making some digital geometric works. Both of these are based on K-uniform tilings. But you can also see some of that color work coming into play. Also been doing a little bit of playing around with a laser engraver. Made this portrait with some geometric patterns in the background and the clothing. A couple more animations, just some play with a star rosette and a six-pointed star motif on the right. Again, playing around with color changes algorithmically. Also, still studying classical Islamic patterns and trying to create new patterns based on traditional principles. So the one on the left, you've got an 18 pointed star rosette, a 12 pointed star rosette, and 6 pointed star rosettes in the same pattern. And the one on the right is based on a 6-4-3-4 tiling that has this lovely floral motif that reminds me of hydrangea. Some more patterns based on K uniform tilings. I've been kind of obsessed with this color scheme lately, these muted tones. Some more animation of some patterns. The one on the left is that same hydrangea style pattern, and the one on the right is a just based on a tiling. I've also been doing some more cut paper collage, mixed media type stuff. The one on the left just has some printed pattern that I constructed, cut out by hand, layered with some metallic paper. And the one on the right was cut out by hand and layered with some hand-painted gouache to get the rainbow tones in the background. I've also steadily been making sticker designs to send out to my Patreon subscribers every month. So the pattern on the left I sent out a couple months ago, the star pattern, the spiral pattern, the star pattern on the right I sent out this month, and the dodecahedron I'm sending out next month. Here's that muted color palette that I've been obsessed with lately. Just a few geometric constructions. The one on the left is root rectangles in a square. The one in the middle is just a regular polygon on a side. And the one on the right is concentric circles containing equal areas. I've also, been getting a little bit brighter with some of my colors too. So the one on the left has that muted color scheme, but it's a zellige pattern based on the square root of 2, where the underlying construction lines are the pattern lines. The pattern in the middle is that Accent Coeur pattern again that I taught as part of my Patreon, and the pattern on the right is just based on some tangent circles in a ring, kind of mimicking some trace, like Gothic tracery, stained glass. It's kind of what I was going for there. And finally, this week, I've been playing around with Apollonian gaskets and circle inversion, and just geometric problems there, having fun. So I was trying to solve another one of those Billings power of form problems and ended up constructing an Apollonian gasket instead, which is more fun anyway. So I'll leave you with a pattern from the Moulay Ismail Mosque in Fez that I colored very, very differently than the original last summer. That's also a face mask filter over on Instagram that you could take a selfie with if you want to. And some illustrations of my cats that I drew. So thank you so much for having me, and let me know if you have any questions.